The hum of the ship's engine was a constant, a sound that became white noise after years in the void. But tonight, it felt different, tense, almost like it was alive and warning me. I stood at the bridge of the Endeavor, staring out at the infinite darkness. The Earth, a fragile blue marble, hung in the distance, oblivious to the threat that loomed closer with every passing second. "This is Captain Rogers, logging my entry. Stardate 3025. The call came from Earth this morning, urgent, desperate. Energy reserves are depleting faster than expected. No natural cause could explain the spike. Something, or someone, is siphoning the planet's lifeblood." I glanced at the team behind me. All seasoned explorers, each with a story as heavy as my own. Yet tonight, their eyes mirrored my unease. This wasn't a simple mission to fix a malfunctioning satellite or chart an unclaimed asteroid. This was war, though the enemy wore no uniforms or flags. Space pirates. A term I'd scoffed at once, but now it felt real enough to chill my blood. "Captain," came the voice of my first officer, Lieutenant Harper. She was sharp, methodical, the kind of leader who kept the crew grounded. "We've picked up movement near the Lagrange point. Could be our culprits." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "Helmsman set a course. Slowly. I don't want to spook them." The ship adjusted its trajectory, gliding through the void like a predator stalking prey. My hand brushed against the console, feeling the slight vibration of the ship's systems. I couldn't help but reflect. How did we get here? How did humanity, once so bold and united, fall into the hands of scavengers? "Sir," Harper's voice cut through my thoughts, urgent now. "Multiple ships detected. Small crafts, but they're moving in formation. They're not running." I frowned. Pirates were cowards. They stole in the shadows, fled when the light hit them. This was different. "Battle stations," I ordered, my voice calm but firm. The crew snapped to action, the hum of the engine now a roar in my ears. "Let's give them a proper welcome." As the Endeavor closed the gap, the pirate ships came into view. Sleek, jagged designs, stripped-down machines made for speed, not comfort. Their insignias glowed faintly, a crude image of a skull encircled by stars. And in the middle of them, a larger ship loomed. A dreadnought. "That's no ordinary pirate vessel," Harper murmured, her fingers flying across the console. "Captain, I'm picking up an energy signature, massive. It's Earth's." My stomach sank. They weren't just stealing energy. They had the means to weaponize it. And the Earth had no idea. "Patch me through to the lead ship," I said, my tone cold. This wasn't my first standoff, but something about this one felt personal. The line clicked open, static filling the air. A voice came through, deep and mocking. "Captain Rogers, I've heard of you. The hero who left Earth to play in the stars. Tell me, do you bleed like the rest of us?" I clenched my jaw, but kept my tone steady. "This is Captain Rogers of the Endeavor. Stand down, or I'll make sure this is your last dance in the void." The voice laughed, low and menacing. "You'll try, but Earth's energy belongs to us now. You can thank your leaders for that. We're just here to collect." The line cut, and I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. This wasn't just about energy. This was a message, a declaration that Earth was vulnerable, and it was my job to stop it. "Ready weapons," I said, my voice like steel. "If they want to fight, we'll give them one they won't forget." The pirate ship shifted, their engines flaring as they prepared for battle. The Endeavor surged forward, and I felt a pang of guilt for what was about to happen. Lives would be lost, but if it meant saving Earth, it was a price I was willing to pay. I gripped the console tighter, my voice steady as I gave the final order. "All hands, prepare for combat. We're not just fighting for today, we're fighting for tomorrow." The first volley of laser fire streaked across the void, lighting up the cold expanse like fireworks on the 4th of July. The Endeavor responded with precision, its cannons unleashing calculated bursts that turned one of the smaller pirate crafts into a spinning, fiery wreck. "Target neutralized," Harper reported, her voice clipped but steady. She was good at this, too good for her age. Most of the crew were. We'd all been hardened by something, somewhere, and it showed. But this wasn't about a firefight. It was about why they were here, and how they got their hands on Earth's energy. "Status on the Dreadnought?" I barked, keeping my eyes fixed on the tactical display. The enemy flagship was holding back, its massive silhouette lurking just outside weapons range. "Still no movement," Harper replied. "They're watching us, Captain." "Waiting. For what?" My gut churned. Pirates didn't wait. They swarmed, overwhelmed, and fled. This calculated restraint wasn't their style. "Keep us moving," I ordered. "Don't let them box us in." The Endeavor weaved through the chaos, taking down 2 more crafts as the pirates tried to form a perimeter. But something was wrong. The Dreadnought wasn't idle. It was deliberate. Every move of the smaller ships seemed designed to corral us, push us into position. "Captain," the voice of Ensign Miller came through, panicked. "They're herding us toward the debris field near the asteroid belt." My chest tightened. The belt was a known death trap, littered with centuries of forgotten space junk and rogue asteroids. A graveyard waiting to claim the reckless. "They want us blind and trapped," Harper said, realization dawning. "If we follow them in there." "We won't." I cut her off. "They're trying to play chess. Let's flip the board." Turning to the comms panel, I opened a channel to the Dreadnought. "This is Captain Rogers. You've got courage, I'll give you that. But I don't think you understand what you're dealing with. Turn back now, and maybe you'll live to regret it." Silence. Then that same mocking voice crackled through. "You're amusing, Captain. Always the hero, aren't you? Tell me, what happens when your people stop believing in heroes?" I gritted my teeth. "I guess we'll never know." The line cut, and I turned to Harper. "Fire an EMP at their smaller ships. I want their formation broken." She hesitated. "Sir, that'll drain our reserves by 12%. We might not have enough to." "Just do it," I snapped. "We can't play this game on their terms." The pulse erupted from the Endeavor, a surge of blue energy that rippled across the battlefield. The smaller crafts faltered, their lights flickering before they drifted aimlessly. But the Dreadnought didn't move. "Impact successful," Harper confirmed, relief barely audible in her tone. "But they're still not budging." I stared at the screen, frustration gnawing at me. What was their play? Why risk so much for energy when Earth had defenses to rival any known power? There had to be more, something we weren't seeing. "Captain," Miller called again, his voice grim. "I'm picking up something strange. A signal. It's coming from the Dreadnought, but it's not a typical transmission." I turned sharply. "Explain." He hesitated. "It's a beacon, and it's broadcasting directly to Earth." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a raid. It was a distraction. The real threat wasn't out here. It was already inside our home. "Give me Earth Command," I barked. The line connected after a tense moment, the face of Admiral Hayes appearing on the screen. "Rogers," he said, his tone brisk. "We're in the middle of. They're transmitting a signal to Earth." I interrupted. "Something's wrong. Check your energy grids. Now!" Hayes' face darkened as he turned away, issuing orders to his team. When he looked back, his expression was grim. "You're right. Energy siphons have been activated in 3 major cities. It's... Rogers, it's massive. If we can't shut them down, I'll handle it," I said, cutting him off. "But I need you to trust me. Whatever this is, it's bigger than a pirate raid. Hayes hesitated, then nodded. Do what you have to. Earth command out. The screen went dark, and I turned back to the crew. We're being played, I said, my voice hard. The dreadnought isn't here to fight. It's here to keep us busy while their people work on Earth. But how do we stop them? Harper asked. If their operation is already underway, we cut the head off the snake, I replied, my gaze locked on the dreadnought. They're coordinating everything from that ship. If we take it down, we buy Earth time. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but they knew better than to argue. This wasn't about comfort or safety. It was about survival. Bring us closer, I ordered, feeling the weight of every life on board. We're going to end this, one way or another. The Endeavor surged forward, a predator closing in on its prey. But as we approached the dreadnought, the air on the bridge grew heavier. The crew worked in tense silence, their movements precise but strained. Every console beeped and every status update felt like the countdown to something catastrophic. Captain, Harper said, breaking the quiet, they're scanning us. It's detailed, more than I'd expect from pirates. I frowned. Scans were standard, but this felt invasive, as if they weren't just studying our ship but dissecting it. Shields at maximum. Don't let them get anything useful. They're not the only one studying, Miller interjected. I've been running an analysis on that beacon. It's not just a signal, it's encoding Earth's energy output patterns. They're mapping the entire grid. A cold realization hit me. They weren't just siphoning energy, they were learning how to control it. If they could manipulate Earth's power supply, they could bring the planet to its knees without firing a single shot. Isolate their transmission, I ordered. If we can jam it. They've encrypted it, Miller said, frustration evident. And it's layered. I've never seen anything like it. My fists clenched. This wasn't the work of ordinary pirates. Someone, or something, far more organized was behind this. Captain, Harper said, her voice trembling slightly. Incoming transmission. It's visual. On screen. The bridge lights dimmed as the main display flickered to life. The face that appeared wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the grizzled visage of a pirate king or the sneer of a rogue admiral. It was calm, calculated, a man in his 40s with piercing gray eyes and a suit that screamed authority. Captain Rogers, he said, his voice smooth and disarmingly polite. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Commander Voss, liaison for the Syndicate. The name hit like a punch to the gut. The Syndicate was a ghost story, a shadow organization rumored to control everything from illegal mining colonies to planetary coups. And now, they had Earth in their sights. Commander Voss, I said, keeping my tone even, you're a long way from the shadows. What does the Syndicate want with Earth's energy? He chuckled, a sound that sent chills down my spine. The Syndicate doesn't want anything, Captain. We take what is owed. Earth has squandered its resources for centuries. We're merely redistributing them to those who will use them efficiently. By draining the planet dry? I shot back. That's not efficiency, it's theft. He smiled faintly. Perspective, Captain. To you, I'm a thief. To the billions who will thrive on what we reclaim, I'm a savior. Before I could respond, the screen cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. He's lying, Harper said, her voice filled with conviction. They're not saving anyone. They're just parasites. Agreed, I said, though Voss's words lingered in my mind. Perspective. It was a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. Captain, Miller called out. We've got movement. The Dreadnought, its weapon systems are powering up. Evasive maneuvers. I barked. The Endeavor banked hard, narrowly dodging a blast of plasma fire. The bridge shook violently, alarms blaring as damage reports flooded in. "They're targeting our engines," Harper said, her hands flying across her console. "We won't last long if they keep this up." "Then we hit back," I said. "Target their weapons array. I want them blind." The Endeavor returned fire, its cannons blazing. The Dreadnought's shields flared, absorbing most of the impact, but one lucky shot struck a vulnerable node. Sparks erupted along its hull, and for a moment, the tide seemed to turn. But then, the unexpected happened. "Captain," Miller said, his voice tight with fear, "I'm detecting a power surge, something massive. It's coming from inside the Dreadnought." On the display, the enemy ship began to glow, faint at first, then brighter and brighter. It wasn't damage. It was energy, pure, raw, and terrifying. "They're channeling Earth's energy," Harper said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're turning it into a weapon." I swallowed hard. "Options?" "None," she replied. "Not unless we can disrupt their core." The core. It was the heart of their operation, the source of their power. If we could destroy it, we'd stop them cold. But getting to it meant breaching the Dreadnought and surviving whatever defenses they had in place. "I'll go," I said, the words falling heavily into the room. The crew stared at me, shocked. "Captain, that's suicide," Harper said. "We don't even know what's inside that ship." "Which is exactly why I have to go," I replied. "They won't expect it. And if I can get to the core, I can shut it down." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Harper nodded, her jaw set. "I'm coming with you." "No," I said firmly. "You're needed here. If this goes sideways, you're the only one who can get the crew home." Her eyes burned with defiance, but she didn't argue. She knew I was right. "Prep the shuttle," I said, "and keep the Endeavor close. If I'm not back in an hour, finish the fight." The shuttle's engines hummed softly, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind on the Endeavor. The Dreadnought loomed ahead, its massive hull a fortress of steel and menace. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to rethink the insanity of this mission. But I pushed those thoughts aside. Earth didn't have time for second guessing. "This is Captain Rogers," I said into my communicator. "Approaching the Dreadnought. No resistance yet." "Be careful, Captain," Harper's voice replied, steady but tinged with concern. "We're monitoring from here. If anything goes wrong..." "Stay focused on the fight," I interrupted. "I'll handle the rest." The shuttle docked with a resounding clang, the airlock hissing open. I stepped into the belly of the beast, my boots echoing on the cold, metallic floor. The interior was eerily quiet, lit by a sickly green glow emanating from the walls. It wasn't just a ship, it was a machine, alive with the pulse of stolen energy. A low hum vibrated through the air, growing louder as I moved deeper inside. The corridors were lined with conduits, glowing faintly as they transported Earth's lifeblood to the core. Every step felt heavier, not just from the weight of my mission, but from the memories this place stirred, memories of other battles, other losses. "Focus, Rogers," I muttered, gripping my blaster tighter. "You've seen worse." But had I? The thought lingered as I approached a massive door, its surface engraved with the Syndicate's insignia. Beyond it, the core awaited. "Captain, you've got movement," Harper's voice crackled in my ear. "3 hostiles, heading your way." I ducked into the shadows, my heart pounding as I listened. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, accompanied by muffled voices. Pirates, armed and armored, their faces obscured by helmets. They weren't here to patrol. They were guarding something. I waited until they passed, then moved swiftly, taking them out one by one. The last one fell with a thud, his weapon clattering to the floor. I didn't stop to think about who they were or why they joined the Syndicate. They were obstacles, and I couldn't afford to falter. The door hissed open, revealing the core chamber. It was massive, a cathedral of technology and raw power. In the center, a pulsating sphere of energy hovered, encased in a lattice of glowing metal. It was beautiful and horrifying all at once, a monument to humanity's hubris and the Syndicate's greed. "Captain," Harper's voice came through, urgent now. "We're detecting another power surge. If that thing goes critical..." "I know," I said, cutting her off. "I'll shut it down." I approached the core, my mind racing. The controls were unfamiliar, alien even. The Syndicate had gone to great lengths to ensure no one could tamper with their prize. But I'd learned a thing or two in my years as a soldier and an explorer. If there was a way to build it, there was a way to break it. As I worked, the hum of the core grew louder, the air crackling with static. Sweat dripped down my face as I bypassed one security measure after another. But then, the room darkened, and a voice filled the air. "Captain Rogers," Voss said, his tone calm but deadly. "Did you really think it would be this easy?" I turned to see him standing at the entrance, flanked by armed guards. He looked as composed as ever, his piercing eyes studying me like a predator sizing up its prey. "You're too late," he continued. "Even if you destroy the core, the Syndicate's operations are already in motion. Earth's energy belongs to us now." I raised my blaster, aiming it squarely at his chest. "Not while I'm breathing," Voss smirked. "That can be arranged." The guards opened fire, and I dove behind a console, returning shots as the room erupted into chaos. Sparks flew, and the core's glow intensified, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. I took down 2 guards, but Voss remained untouched, his calm demeanor infuriating. "Give it up, Captain," he said. "You can't win." "Maybe not," I replied, my gaze flicking to the core. "But I can make sure you lose." Before he could react, I fired at the core. The lattice shattered, and the energy within erupted, a blinding light consuming everything. The force threw me back, pain searing through my body as the chamber began to collapse. "Captain!" Harper's voice screamed in my ear. "Get out of there!" I stumbled to my feet, smoke and debris filling the air. Voss was gone, consumed by the explosion, but his words echoed in my mind. The Syndicate's operations were still in motion. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. I made it to the shuttle, barely escaping as the dreadnought imploded. The shockwave rocked the Endeavor, but the crew's cheers told me we'd survived. For now. Back on the bridge, Harper looked at me, her eyes filled with relief and something else. Admiration, perhaps. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "Not yet. Voss was right. The Syndicate won't stop. This was just a battle. The war is far from over." I turned to the crew, my voice steady but resolute. "We've bought Earth some time, but we'll need more than time to win this fight. Get some rest, everyone. Tomorrow, we plan our next move." As the bridge fell silent, I looked out at the stars, the weight of what was ahead pressing down on me. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, one thought kept me going. Until next time, stay curious and keep looking up. I'll see you on the next adventure. The energy surged around me, arcs of blinding light leaping from the core to the surrounding conduits. The heat was unbearable, and my skin prickled with the electric charge in the air. But I couldn't stop, not when the fate of Earth hung in the balance. Voss had disappeared into the shadows, but his presence lingered like a ghost, his words echoing in my mind. Perspective. I'd heard it before, from generals, leaders, and tyrants. They always claimed the high ground, but their victories left scars on those they claimed to save. I reached the core, my blaster raised, but hesitated. Destroying it would end the immediate threat, but Harper's warning played in my ear. "Captain, If you destabilize the core without controlling the discharge, the resulting explosion could take you, and half the ship, with it. Then we make sure it counts, I muttered, scanning the control panel. The Syndicate's systems were labyrinthine, designed to confuse and dissuade tampering. But they weren't foolproof. Harper, I said into the comm, my voice calm despite the chaos. I need you to run a bypass on the core stabilization matrix. If we can overload the containment field. Captain, that's suicide, she interrupted. If you're caught in the blast, just do it, I snapped, cutting her off. We don't have time. The comm went silent, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't comply. But then my handheld device buzzed, Harper's voice returning, steady but strained. Bypass initiated. You've got 60 seconds. The countdown began. The core's light grew brighter, its hum rising to a deafening pitch. I turned to leave, but a shadow blocked my path. Voss stood there, his blaster trained on me, his expression cold and resolute. You're predictable, Captain, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. Always willing to sacrifice yourself for the greater good. But sacrifices are meaningless without results. This isn't about me, I replied, leveling my blaster at him. It's about stopping you. He fired first, the shot grazing my shoulder and sending pain searing through my arm. I returned fire, the blast striking his weapon and sending it clattering to the floor. But Voss didn't flinch. Instead, he lunged at me, his movement swift and precise. We grappled near the core, the energy storm intensifying around us. His strength was surprising, fueled by a cold determination that matched my own. But I'd fought tougher opponents, and I wasn't about to let him win. With a final surge of effort, I threw him against the lattice, the raw energy surging into his body. His scream was brief, cut off as the core's light consumed him. The room shook violently, the containment field on the verge of collapse. Captain, get out of there! Harper's voice screamed in my ear. I didn't need to be told twice. Sprinting for the exit, I dodged falling debris as the core's energy spiraled out of control. The ship trembled beneath my feet, the metal groaning as if it were alive and in pain. I reached the shuttle just as the core detonated. The blast sent a shockwave through the ship, tearing it apart piece by piece. The shuttle's engines roared to life, propelling me out of the dreadnought's grasp as it imploded in a blinding flash of light. Aboard the Endeavor. The shuttle docked with the Endeavor, the crew rushing to greet me as I stumbled out, bruised and exhausted but alive. Harper was the first to reach me, her eyes wide with relief and anger. You could have died, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't, I replied, collapsing into a chair. And neither did Earth. The crew cheered, the tension breaking as they realized the immediate threat was over. But as I looked out at the debris field where the dreadnought once floated, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from a victory. The revelation. Hours later, as the Endeavor drifted in orbit, Harper approached me on the bridge. Captain, we've analyzed the data from the dreadnought. There's something you need to see. She handed me a tablet, the screen displaying a series of intercepted transmissions. My stomach sank as I read the words. Multiple dreadnoughts detected. Syndicate fleet mobilizing. Primary targets, Earth and outer colonies. They weren't just testing us, I said, my voice low. This was a distraction. Harper nodded grimly. And now they're coming in force. I stared out at the stars, my mind racing. The Syndicate wasn't just an enemy. They were an empire, and this was only the beginning of their conquest. But if they thought Earth would fall without a fight, they'd underestimated us. Harper, I said, my voice steady, prepare the crew. We're not done yet. She saluted, her determination mirroring my own. As she left, I leaned against the console, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on me. Until next time, I murmured, my voice a quiet promise to the stars. Stay curious and keep looking up. I'll see you on the next adventure. The stars outside the Endeavor's viewport seemed colder, sharper, as if they knew what was coming. The bridge was alive with activity, every member of the crew moving with purpose. The intercepted transmissions from the Syndicate's network left no doubt. A full-scale assault was imminent, and Earth was their target. Harper, I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. Give me a status report. She stood at attention, datapad in hand. We've analyzed the Syndicate's fleet composition based on the Dreadnought's logs. It's worse than we thought, Captain. They're deploying 6 more Dreadnoughts, supported by dozens of smaller vessels. Estimated arrival, 48 hours. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over the crew like a shroud. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. And Earth's defenses? Minimal, Harper admitted. Most of the orbital fleet is tied up on the outer colonies. They can't get back in time. That was the Syndicate's genius. They'd stretched us thin, and now they were ready to strike at the heart of humanity. I turned to the crew, my voice firm. We're not letting Earth fall. Not while we're still breathing. But Captain, Ensign Miller said, his face pale. We're just one ship. What can we do against an entire fleet? We're not alone, I replied, locking eyes with him. There are others out here who won't stand by while the Syndicate tightens its grip. Pirates, traitors, even rival factions. They've all suffered under the Syndicate's heel. It's time we remind them that unity can still win wars. A call to arms. The Endeavor became a beacon, broadcasting a rallying cry across the sector. Harper and Miller worked tirelessly to spread the message, using encrypted channels to reach potential allies. The response was slow at first, hesitation, fear, distrust. But then, one by one, the replies came. From the depths of the asteroid belts emerged rogue mining ships, their heavy equipment retrofitted into makeshift weapons. From the trade routes came merchant vessels, their crews eager to defend the worlds they called home. And from the Syndicate's own shadow, defectors and outlaws answered the call, their hatred for Voss's empire stronger than their fear. As the Allied fleet assembled, I stood on the bridge, watching the display screens fill with the blips of arriving ships. Each one carried a story, a reason to fight. They weren't soldiers, they were survivors. And they were ready to make a stand. Captain, Harper said, her voice tinged with pride, we've got over 50 ships. It's not enough to match the Syndicate's fleet, but it's enough to make them bleed. I interrupted. And sometimes, that's all you need. The plan. The crew gathered in the briefing room, the tension palpable. I stood at the center, the holographic display showing the Syndicate's projected attack route. They'll come at us in waves, I began, pointing to the key choke points. Their dreadnoughts will anchor the assault, while the smaller vessels flank and harass. If we hit their supply lines and force them to overcommit, we can weaken their formation. And then what? Harper asked. We can't hold them off forever. We don't have to, I replied. We just need to buy Earth enough time to mobilize its defenses. The Syndicate isn't invincible. They thrive on fear and control. If we can break their momentum, we'll show the galaxy that they can be beaten. Miller frowned. And the Dreadnoughts? Even one of those could wipe us out. That's where the Endeavor comes in, I said, my voice steady. We've faced one before. We know their vulnerabilities. We'll take the fight to them and disable their flagship. If we can cut off the head, the body will follow. The room was silent, the weight of the plan sinking in. Finally, Harper nodded. It's a long shot, but it's our only shot. The calm before the storm. As the fleet prepared for battle, I found myself on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The enormity of what lay ahead pressed down on me, but I couldn't show it. The crew needed a leader, and leaders didn't have the luxury of doubt. "Penny for your thoughts, Captain?" Harper's voice broke the silence. I turned to see her leaning against the doorway, a small smile playing on her lips. "You should be resting," I said. "So should you," she replied. "But I get the feeling you don't sleep much." "Not when the galaxy's falling apart," I admitted, my tone lighter than I felt. She stepped closer, her expression softening. "You've carried us this far, Captain. Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll follow you to the end." I nodded, her words a small but needed comfort. "Let's make sure the end is a long way off." The Allied fleet drifted into formation, an improvised armada of scavenged ships, merchant vessels, and retrofitted freighters. Against the Syndicate's polished and overwhelming forces, it looked like a patchwork rebellion. But in the hearts of every pilot and crew member, there burned a singular determination. Earth would not fall. I stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, every sensor and display attuned to the approaching Syndicate fleet. They were coming, and they weren't hiding it. The dreadnoughts emerged first, their massive hulls blotting out the stars, followed by a swarm of smaller, faster attack ships. It was a wave of destruction, and we were its target. "Captain, they've crossed the outer marker," Harper reported. "Estimated time to engagement, 3 minutes." I took a deep breath, my gaze fixed on the tactical display. "All ships, hold your positions. Let them come to us." The opening salvo. The Syndicate fired first. Streams of plasma and energy beams cut through the void, streaking toward our formation. The Allied fleet responded in kind, their weapons lighting up the darkness. The two forces collided in a symphony of destruction, ships exploding into fiery debris as the battle began in earnest. The Endeavor shuddered as a blast struck our shields, the bridge lights flickering. "Shields holding at 82%, Harper called out, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Return fire on that lead corvette. Let's thin their numbers." The ship's cannons roared, their precision strikes tearing through the Syndicate's smaller vessels. But for every ship we took down, 2 more seemed to take its place. The dreadnoughts loomed in the distance, their weapons picking off our fleet with brutal efficiency. "This isn't working," Harper said, frustration seeping into her tone. "We're outgunned." I gritted my teeth, my mind racing. "It's not about beating them head-on. We need to divide their forces." Turning to Miller, I issued the order. "Send the signal. Phase 2 is a go." The feint. Across the battlefield, our smaller, faster ships broke formation, darting toward the Syndicate's flanks. It was a risky maneuver, but it worked. The Syndicate's lighter craft peeled away to intercept, creating gaps in their formation. It was just what we needed. "Focus fire on the lead dreadnought," I commanded. "If we can take it out, the rest will falter." The Endeavor surged forward, leading the charge. The Allied fleet followed, their weapons pounding the dreadnought's shields. Sparks flew as the Syndicate vessel retaliated, its massive cannons tearing through our ranks. But we didn't stop. "Harper, status on their shields?" I asked, my eyes locked on the tactical display. "Dropping fast, but so are ours," she replied. "We can't take much more of this." "Then we finish it now," I said. "Prepare the disruptor array. Target their core." The disruptor was our last ace, a weapon capable of overloading a ship's power systems. But it was a one-shot deal, and we'd have to get dangerously close to make it count. The turning point. The Endeavor plunged into the heart of the battle, weaving through debris and enemy fire. The dreadnought loomed ahead, its massive bulk blocking out everything else. Alarms blared as another blast struck us, sending the bridge into chaos. "Disruptor charged and ready," Harper reported. "We're in range." "Fire," I ordered. The disruptor unleashed a blinding beam of energy, striking the dreadnought's core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, The ship convulsed, its system sparking as the overload cascaded through its structure. The dreadnought's weapons fell silent, and its hull began to crack. "We did it!" Miller shouted, but the celebration was short-lived. "Captain," Harper said, her voice urgent, "the dreadnought's going critical. If it goes, it'll take half the fleet with it. Pull us back," I ordered. "All ships retreat to safe distance." The Endeavor veered away, the Allied fleet following suit. Behind us, the dreadnought exploded in a blinding flash, the shockwave rippling through the battlefield. Syndicate ships were thrown into disarray, their formation shattered. The Syndicate's last move. "Captain," Harper said, her tone grim, "the remaining dreadnoughts are regrouping. They're falling back." I frowned. The Syndicate didn't retreat, not without a reason. "What are they planning?" Miller's voice broke in, panic evident. "Sir, I'm detecting energy spikes from the remaining dreadnoughts. They're powering up their main cannons, targeting Earth." My blood ran cold. The Syndicate wasn't trying to win the battle anymore. They were going to make an example of Earth, no matter the cost. "All ships, focus fire on those dreadnoughts," I shouted. "We can't let them fire." The Allied fleet surged forward, throwing everything they had at the Syndicate's remaining forces. But the dreadnoughts were prepared, their shields absorbing the brunt of the attack as their cannons charged. "Harper," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos, "what are our options?" She hesitated, then looked at me, her expression grim. "We could ram them." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. It was a suicide move, but it might be the only way to stop them. "Prepare the Endeavor for impact," I said, my heart sinking. "We're not letting them win." The Endeavor surged forward, its engines roaring as it raced toward the Syndicate's lead dreadnought. The bridge was silent, save for the hum of the ship's systems and the quiet determination on every face. They knew what was at stake, and they were ready to give everything to protect Earth. "Harper," I said, breaking the silence, "divert all remaining power to the shields and engines. We need to get as close as possible." She hesitated, her eyes locking with mine. "Captain, if we do this—" "There's no other way," I interrupted, my voice firm. "Earth comes first. Always." She nodded, her jaw tight, and relayed the orders. Around us, the Allied fleet intensified their assault, buying us precious seconds as the Endeavor closed the gap. The Syndicate's dreadnoughts loomed ahead, their cannons glowing ominously as they charged for a planet-killing strike. "Captain," Miller called out, his voice shaking, "we're entering their firing range." "Hold steady," I replied. "Not yet." The final maneuver. The Endeavor weaved through the chaos, dodging enemy fire as it accelerated toward the lead dreadnought. The tactical display lit up with warnings, but I kept my eyes on the target. "Harper," I said, my tone steady, "activate the disruptor. Let's make them feel it." The ship's disruptor array fired, sending a pulse of energy toward the Syndicate vessel. It wasn't enough to destroy it outright, but the impact destabilized its shields, creating an opening. "Now!" I shouted. "All power to engines." The Endeavor roared forward, closing the final distance. The dreadnought's weapons fired in desperation, but it was too late. With a deafening crash, the Endeavor slammed into the enemy ship, the impact tearing through its hull. The bridge erupted in chaos as alarms blared and sparks flew. I was thrown from my seat, the world spinning as the ship buckled under the strain. But when the dust settled, I forced myself to my feet, gripping the console for support. "Status?" I demanded. Harper's voice crackled through the calm, strained but alive. We breached their core. It's destabilizing." Through the viewport, I saw the dreadnought begin to collapse, its structure failing as the core's energy spiraled out of control. The other Syndicate ships hesitated, their formation breaking as confusion rippled through their ranks. "They're retreating," Miller said, disbelief in his voice. "We did it." The aftermath. The Syndicate fleet scattered, their remaining dreadnoughts vanishing into hyperspace. The Allied fleet erupted into cheers, their victory hard-fought and hard-won. But on the Endeavor, the mood was somber. The ship was crippled, its systems barely holding together, and the cost of victory weighed heavily on us all. I slumped into the captain's chair, exhaustion threatening to overtake me. Harper approached, her face bruised but determined. "Captain," she said, her voice soft, "we've received a transmission from Earth. They're calling it a miracle." I managed a faint smile. "Miracles don't come cheap." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "And they're asking for you. A message to Earth." Back on Earth, the victory was celebrated as a turning point, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. The Syndicate had been dealt a crippling blow, and for the first time in years, humanity had something to believe in. From the deck of the Endeavor, patched together and orbiting Earth like a sentinel, I recorded my message. "This is Captain Rogers, reporting from the Endeavor." Against impossible odds, we stood together. Not as soldiers or factions, but as people. People who refused to bow to tyranny. Today, we showed the galaxy what humanity is capable of when we fight for what matters. But this isn't the end. The Syndicate will be back, and the battles ahead will be even harder. We must be ready. Stay strong, stay united, and remember, the stars are not the limit, they're just the beginning. Closing reflections. As I ended the recording, I looked out at Earth, its blue and green surface shining against the void. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. We weren't just surviving. We were fighting for a future worth living. Harper joined me, her presence a steadying force. "What now, Captain?" she asked. I smiled faintly, the weight of the galaxy still pressing on my shoulders, but feeling just a little lighter. "Now, we rebuild, and when the Syndicate comes back, we'll be ready." She nodded, and together we stared out at the endless expanse of space, the stars calling us to the next adventure. "Until next time," I murmured, my voice filled with quiet determination. "Stay curious and keep looking up."